Okay, so it's 2:02. There might be certain participants who would be joining us, but in the meanwhile, I think we should start with the session. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Saili. I'm a chartered accountant, and I work as the senior product manager for tax at Reveris. So, in today's webinar, we will be discussing about existing and the expected Indian tax measures to counter COVID-19 impact. So to start with, like every time, I will be briefly introducing our panelists. Then we will start the discussion around today's topic. And I would request all the participants to please keep posting your questions in the Q&A tab that is visible on your screen while the session is going on. We will take up a few questions which are related to the ongoing discussion, and the remaining questions will be taken up at the end in the Q&A segment. So today with us, we have three expert professionals, Mr. Rajesh Athavale, Mr. Rakesh Gupta, and Mr. Sudipto Bhattacharjee. So let me give you all a brief introduction about them. So Mr. Rajesh Athavale is the head of direct tax at JMP Advisors. He's a CA and a cost accountant with over 24 years of experience in the corporate taxation field. He has advised multinational companies on domestic tax, international tax, and transfer pricing issues. He is also a member of the Income Tax Bar Association, and he also represents his clients in income tax matters at the tribunal. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Rakesh Gupta, our second panelist, is a senior CA with over 2 decades of experience in the corporate world. He is the VP and group tax head for the RGP Group, which is one of the India's largest industrial conglomerates spanning software, infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, automotive, tires, and so on. He oversees and monitors the corporate tax function of each of the constituent companies, and he is also responsible for tax compliance, structuring, and litigation management for the group entities. And finally, we have Mr. Sudipto Bhattacharjee, who is the partner at Advaita Legal. He is a lawyer with more than 15 years of post-qualification experience, specializing in the indirect tax advisory, tax controversy management, and contract documentation. He focuses on indirect tax and allied commercial laws vis-a-vis power, e-commerce, alcoholic beverages industry, mining, infrastructure sector, etc. Sudipto is highly recognized as highly regarded in indirect tax by World Tax, the comprehensive guide to world's leading tax firms for 2020, and has been repeatedly recognized as an indirect tax leader for India by International Tax Review since 2017. So it's a pleasure to have the three of you on the panel for today's webinar. I welcome all the participants and our panelists on the for today's webinar.
Thank you, Sally.
So here comes the standard question that I have been asking the speakers in all the webinars, because we always have professionals on the panel who come from different professional backgrounds, different industries or sectors. So like every time before we go to the topic for today's discussion, I would like to ask Mr. Athavale, Mr. Gupta and Mr. Bhattacharjee as to what your first reaction to the current situation was and how the lockdown has impacted your respective businesses. For example, has the pace of the business gone down significantly, or is your business able to cope up because you had a strong business continuity plan in place?
Thank you, Sally. Let me just start. And hello, everyone. And thank you, Reveris, for giving this opportunity to talk to each and every participant. And I'm privileged to be part of this panel. So as we all know, means like this is a completely unprecedented and never experienced kind of situation. I think in decades this has not been experienced by anyone actually. And in March when we started having feeling of this coronavirus issue, nobody would have thought that we will be under lockdown for such a long time of 2 months, and everything, all planning and thing will be get haywire actually. So each and every business is under deep stress. There is no doubt about that. Entire economy is under stress, not only India but entire world economy. We we do hear about that kind of pressure on the GDP of the entire world, US as well as India, and as on date, the complete uncertainty where we are actually, or where we are heading to. So nobody, none of the experts, none of the doctors, none of the economists are able to say with certainty that when this is going to be peaked and where the economy will take shape. So this is a really very tough situation for the entire industry, and naturally each and every industry is under stress. Some of the industry may be having lesser impact, some of the industry may be having higher impact. But I think none of the business can say that we are we are flourishing in this kind of situation. So it's a entire business, whatever kind of business continuity plan you have, but nobody would have thought of this kind of lockdown and complete business is hurt. So I think and every business is working on their future plan, their cash flow, their business continuity, and it's a challenging time. It's a huge challenging time for each and every industry.
Sudipto, your views on this?
I think I will reflect and amplify the gloom and doom that Rakeshji said. Especially, my practice, 65 to 70% of it is tax litigation, court-based tax litigation. With courts closed, I mean, no amount of business continuity plan could have helped me. So I have my practice personally has been very badly hit. March, in the last 12 days, there were 40 hearings that got cancelled for me. So, and of course, nothing has happened since April, May. And also what happens is, in tax litigation, very rarely would you see something qualifying as very urgent. Because that's the threshold that Supreme Court has. In fact, Patna High Court almost imposed cost on us because we thought something was urgent and the judge was not convinced. It's been bad, but I think the silver lining is the fact that courts are adopting video hearings, e-hearings in a much wider way. Not only courts at a lower level, also we have seen CBIC rather allowing e-hearings for at a commissioner or commissioner appeals level. CESTAT also seems to be moving in that direction. I think by the end of it, in the longer term, these would be the silver linings for us, because that would enable a lot of lawyers who specialize, or professionals who specialize in any particular area of law or regulation. They can then appear all over India by using virtual means, instead of incurring the travel cost, because often clients may not be keen to pay for travel, or often travel is inconvenient. So some of those factors go out of the way. So this can be a positive disruption. I think that's the way I look at it, because otherwise it will be far too gloomy. So I think today, after almost 1.5 months, we had a court appearance. We challenged the special corona fee of 70% on sale of alcohol that Delhi government has levied. Thankfully, we got notice issued. So that 5 minutes of hearing or 10 minutes of hearing, I think, was after a very long time. So that's where we stand.
Okay.
I also echo with what are the sentiments expressed by Rakesh and Sudipto. The chartered accountant as such, we are not immune to this, whatever the situation is going on. And as you heard, that practicing chartered accountants are the key advisors to the business community. And therefore, in this bad time, in the difficult time, this business community is looking upon the advisors. And the challenge is to stay ahead in this bad time and be in a position to provide a correct and a legal advice to the client. And as chartered accountant, typically the practice area is the audit practice, tax practice, and the advisory practice. Normally, tax is also divided into two parts: litigation and the advisory services. So as I mentioned by Sudipto, yes, litigation practice in the bad shape. Unless and until the judiciary start functioning, we are not able to, even the judiciary start, whether we will be able to attend the office of the department or the tribunal or the courts. That is a major impact of this thing. Second important aspects we are facing, basically, that traditional chartered accountant practice were depending upon the physical records, this thing, and to cope up with, and we have been working in the offices, and to shift the area of practice from office to home. And of course, major of the practitioner has shifted their office to home. But to cope up with the idea of that all staff will also start functioning from the home. It is basically a difficult task because from the infrastructure perspective also, from the management of the documents, records, that perspective, and the audits, especially because normally we do the audit at the client space, and if the client is not in a position to provide the books of account, difficult to cope up with the audit pressure. So that is important point. So as a chartered accountant, we took this as an opportunity basically to prioritize the low hanging fruit, basically knowledge management or training, in-house training. So those type of thing, or client management, because and some of the chartered accountant, I feel that this business continuity plan was already in place, because most of the chartered accountant has placed their records from the server to the cloud, and they have given basically access of the laptops to the all chartered accountant and their staff. So the business continuity plan is going on very well in the most of the chartered accountants. So definitely, as I mentioned to you, that we are not different from the other practices, but definitely if the client is having a pressure, definitely indirectly the pressure comes back to the advisors and the chartered accountant also. So definitely the practice got impacted because of the COVID situation.
Correct. So in addition to the issues that we are facing, we also have been seeing at the current economic conditions, and we were all waiting for a stimulus package, which is now getting announced in multiple tranches. The government has already announced various economic relief measures ranging from financial aid and provision of free or maybe subsidized food and water to debt repayment deferrals. They've also announced recently, they've also announced certain relief measures to help the small businesses. But having said all of this, there are multiple other sectors which have also been badly impacted by this situation because disrupted cash flows, change in the consumption patterns, and multiple other factors will definitely make the crisis worsen further, because overall the slowdown will have an impact on the business plan in the coming fiscal year. And hence these businesses will also need a lifeline. We have all been following the updates which come from the government to ease the burden of tax payments and compliances, which shows that the government has consistently been supportive. However, we have also seen some negative changes, like the newly introduced equalization levy on e-commerce transactions and related tedious provisions. So a question to the panelists: do you feel that the tax administration is going to face this twin challenge, where they have to collect revenues for the government, however at the same time they would also want to create favorable conditions for the private industry to help them sustain and perform better?
So I will I think specifically, since we mentioned equalization levy, there is definitely, even before COVID-19, I think there was a lot of opposition to that. There were a lot of representations that were filed that it should be postponed because, people could see COVID-19 on the horizon and the consequent economic slowdown. Now, I think there is absolute necessity to, at the very least, postpone it. And there is not only economic rationale behind that, there is a constitutional rationale also. I have written extensively on this, on the lack of constitutional validity of equalization levy. I wrote about it in 2016. I have written about it recently, last month also. And there are two broad heads to that. One is that point of legislative competence. See, subject matter of equalization levy is tax on digital services available from non-residents. And the power, constitutional power, is drawn from entry 92C, which was never notified and now deleted after GST, and entry 97, which is the residuary entry of union list. However, this is clearly a matter that is covered under GST laws because it's a service at the end of the day, which is enacted under Article 246A. A field that is already occupied under 246A cannot be separately legislated by entry 97. So that is one broad point. And second, and I think the larger point, is that of treaty violations. See, if we read the Indian Constitution, Article 37, 51C, 253, there's a constitutional mandate. The Parliament has to make laws which are in consonance with India's treaty obligations. If you look at why equalization levy was kept outside Income Tax Act, basically to deny the benefit of double taxation avoidance agreements. So doing indirectly something that cannot be done directly is prohibited under law. Indirectly, the idea was to overcome, supersede treaty obligations of India, which I think is not tenable from a constitutional perspective. So equalization levy clearly needs reconsideration in the current circumstances because of economic and constitutional reasons. And any such, there are a number of other things that are pending, where there are constitutional issues being raised. Whether in the context of GST, you look at the issue of transitional credit or transition of educational cessors credit, GST on ocean freight. Many of these battles the government is fighting and continues to fight, but maybe this is the time to rethink whether these battles ought to be fought by the government, or shouldn't our energies be focused more on economic recovery than fighting court battles on some of these issues?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rajesh, please continue. Yeah.
I just wanted to discuss from the direct tax perspective the importance of the equalization levy in lieu of the digitalization. And as you are aware that there are two thoughts principle basically evolve around the year, that some of the countries like developed countries basically believe on the source rule taxation. Developing countries are basically force income tax on the source-based taxation, whereas the developed countries basically promoting the resident-based taxation. So over a period of time, there was a tussle between the developing countries and developed countries that who wants to protect their tax base. And of late, you have seen that even developed countries are fighting each other about the protecting their tax base, and that's why you must have seen that the BEPS erosion plan, basically base erosion plan, basically promulgated by the OECD with the G20 country, and India is forefront, basically is one of the observer of the OECD this thing. But India has taken a position since even if you see the Income Tax Act, the section 195, section 916, 917, all are basically source-based taxation. And considering the evolvement in the change in the business scenario from the brick model business to the digital business, you must have seen that a lot of foreign companies are carrying out business, and because of the demography of India, they will find a huge opportunity in India or like other developing countries where they will get a more basically demand for their product. And definitely from that perspective, the source country would like to protect their basically tax base, and from that perspective they have. And if you see the recent budget also 2020, a lot of amendment has also been taken place. They tried to basically increase the scope of the equalization levy. Further, they want to basically tax the substantial economic presence. This is a new criteria. They want to bring new things on the law. So definitely going forward, because of the change in the scenario in the business model, the government, all government, in fact, the developed countries also will try to see that how their tax base will be protected.
Yeah, so I agree with what Rajesh has said, and Sudipta, I have some different views on that actually, because when this treaty was drafted or when this constitution provisions was written, nobody would thought of that kind of business which will go on the digitized mode. Actually. Now we are living in a complete different world, and we don't know this after this COVID thing. The entire business methodology will completely take a different shape, and we will be doing more and more business on the digital platform, and bricks and mortar will be very less in time to come. So in this situation, I don't see there may be a question mark on the quantum compliance complications and procedural part of collection, and how that government can enforce that foreign jurisdiction to pay taxes in India. But heart of heart means like all these multinationals who are exporting their product or exporting their services in India, why India should not have any right to tax it? And ultimately, this is something means like today India has started means like other countries will also follow very soon. So there has to be Indian government, and as a taxpayer, you and me would always expect that fair share of taxes are paid by all these MNCs who are minting money from the Indian market. I don't see any unfairness in that. Yeah, there may be question mark on the how can we ease the compliance, how can we make it more tax friendly, so that tax can be easily collected and there is very clarity and certainty in the law.
I think my only point was I'm not on the logical fairness of it. Logically, yes. I mean, if someone is earning revenue from a source, and that's why the whole discussion about BEPS and whole discussion about digital taxation started. I think equalization levy, particularly, we were too quick off the block, because I think globally consensus is a few months. I mean, if not a few months away, maybe 1 year away. So that sort of a global consensus-based approach ought to have been adopted rather than equalization levy, which by itself, I mean, the manner in which it has been done raises a lot of constitutional questions. I was coming from the perspective that given where we stand today, do we need to walk down a path which will definitely lead to litigation because it is so vulnerable to constitutional validity, and waste a lot of time and energy of the government as well as the SSEs? Instead of that, I mean, I'm not against digital taxation. Of course, we'll have to go towards that. But maybe this is the time, the next 6-7 months, we focus on lower hanging fruits. I mean, I think that was the larger point I was trying to get at.
Okay, so we were talking about the recent updates. So recently there was also a new circular which was issued by the CBDT for clarification in respect of residency under Section 6 of the Income Tax Act. So what is your take on this? And are there any other areas which require similar clarifications?
Yeah, Rajesh, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a thing. This is very important clarification issued by the CBDT. In fact, India was not the first to basically come out with this thing. They have observed what the other countries are doing, what is the OECD country is doing, and India has thereafter issued a clarification. So I just wanted to highlight 2-3 things. One thing is that yes, it is a good clarification issued well in time by the CBDT. And this is not only restricted to the financial year 1920, but they are going to declare another clarification for the going forward for the financial year 2021. So definitely, but the scope of this circular was limited to the tax residency of an individual. So from that perspective, we need to see whether only residents are going to affect because of that. Further, second important thing is that this circular has been issued from the perspective of the domestic tax law. What happened to the treaty? The definition of resident is also under the treaty. So what will have impact on the treaty? Of course, the non-resident has an option to be governed by the provisions of the income tax or act of the treaty, whichever is beneficial to him. But definitely whether this circular can be extended to the treaty or not. And for that purpose, I think one may look at the OECD basically paper. They have come out with the analysis of the tax treaty and the impact of the COVID on those things. So this is recently in April 2020, OECD has come out with that paper. So one should look at what is the OECD basically comments on relation to the tax residence status. Second important thing is that whether logic of this circular can be extended to the business situation, where because of, as you're aware, that physical presence nowadays is not necessarily required. Even the service fee where the people travel because of the substantial presence of that company in the source country. So whether this circular can get extended to the P situation, permanent establishment situation, service P, fixed P, construction P, there are various issues are around this, that because of the unplanned presence of the foreign person in India, whether that will give rise to the permanent establishment. Because under each tax treaty, there are certain rules, there are certain norms for the threshold for the physical presence for constituting the permanent establishment, whether the logic can be extended to those things. The third and important point I just wanted to highlight, that case of effective management regulation, which has been incorporated since last 3 to 4 years under the Income Tax Act. Section 6 has been basically amended to bring basically within the ambit of the taxation, even foreign companies. If the foreign companies are incorporated outside India and control and manage from India, so it is possible that if the management who is taking day in day out the important decisions of the foreign company because of the force lockdown period, because of unplanned presence. Those basically personnel are now sitting in India, and during this lockdown period are basically driving the company while sitting in India. Whether that will trigger the POEM issue for the foreign company, I think CBDT should also come out with certain clarification on those aspects in line with the other countries has taken that initiative. If you see the Ireland, if you see the Australia, Singapore, Luxembourg, in fact, Luxembourg and Netherlands, Germany has come out with the separate agreement basically to provide the tax statement for the frontier workers. So India should also consider basically that type of basically additional clarification or the circular in this respect because of this the lockdown situation.
Yes, so means like Rajesh has very widely covered. Actually. One or 2 points which I also have in this. So the circular which has been issued is mainly covered about the Section 6 situation, which is mainly on the individual concern individually. But there may be situation where means like individual is not able to move out because of COVID situation impacting the relatives, spouse, his kids, children, his parents. What happens in those situations? The person who has come in India and suppose some of his family member or his parents or his brother, sister, spouse, anyone is impacted by COVID actually. Because of those situations, he is forced to stay in India. What about all those kind of cases? In those cases, if that this circular may not be applicable, or if he is not quarantined or is not impacted by the COVID disease, I think there are various other issues which still to be addressed by CBDT on this. And man particularly is a huge impact on the POEM and significant economic presence.
In fact, even from a GST perspective, there can be a minor implication, not as major as under income taxes, but if it constitutes a PE, overzealous tax officer under GST can argue that there is a fixed establishment in India, and to that extent argue that services were provided from within India as opposed to from outside India. And to that extent, while tax will continue to apply, but whether reverse charge or whether under forward charge, whether the foreign company becomes liable to take registration in India, some of those nuances can become relevant. So I completely agree that I think wider clarification probably is necessary, not only from the income tax perspective, but also covering this aspect or this angle from a GST side.
Okay. And as Sudipto mentioned some time back, there are certain web hearings which have started to go forward from the court's perspective. So there's a recent update in which the ITAT Mumbai concluded its first ever web hearing, in which they granted stay for recovering of demand to facilitate employee payments in this situation. So I consider this as a positive move, but I would like to hear from you that when it comes to cases where stay has already been granted, how will the expiry of time granted in the order be calculated?
Rajeshji, I think you can.
Sudipta, you can start because you are regularly going to the courts and all the things. You can start, then we can add something.
Okay. No, so I think in terms of the limitation period, there are multiple orders that have come, including from the Supreme Court. So basic concept is in this particular period, the limitation period, the meter of limitation has stopped moving. So it will start moving only after 30th June, I think, if I remember the date correctly, because it got extended once. After 30th June, again, it will start moving. So whatever was the limitation period on the start date of this COVID-19 lockdown, it will be for limitation purposes as if this time has not been expended. So there are multiple orders from various forums without going into the details. So limitation is not something I think we need to be worried about. Only one thing I would highlight here is that Supreme Court has passed the order under Article 141 and not under Article 142. A bit of a technicality. So 141 governs all courts, okay, and 142 is what is law of the land. Because Supreme Court has granted that or passed that order under 141, I mean, if I was a very crafty revenue officer, I could say that it does not bind a quasi-judicial authority. A hearing before a commissioner or an assessment proceeding is not covered by that. It is only at a ITAT or a SESTAT or upwards level where this order applies. I don't think that was the intent of the Supreme Court. So I think such an attempt will ultimately fail, but we need to be cognizant of this particular angle.
Yeah, I think the important point is also that we need to government need to relook at that recent amendment to Section 254, where we know that the state can be granted by tribunal only if the 20% of tax is paid by the associate. Okay, in this kind of situation, wherever the new cases which are going to come, okay, and this 20% may be huge burden, and unfortunately there is no upper ceiling on that 20%. We see the cases where the department left and right demands of thousands of crores actually. And in this kind of situation, how can one expect that that 20% is to be paid? And sometimes this you don't get a favorable because rulings at the commissioner appeal, because we know that they are more guided by the numbers rather than the principle. So this 20% rule for payment of demand before the tribunal grant any stay is going to haunt business like anything in future. And mainly in this kind of COVID situation, where the DPP is already under stress, this may be a huge issue for the taxpayers in future.
Completely agree, sir. I think, similar provision under GST also, and the outer cap there is almost 100 crores. If we take CGST and SGST together, so effectively it's like being uncapped. And
10 crore in the service tax regime actually.
Yeah. It used to be 10 crores in SESTAT, but now effectively it's 50 under CGST, 50 under SGST. So effectively 100 crores and 30%. So 20 for first appeal and 10% for second appeal. So I think you're absolutely right. And this is something that the government can only do because, trust me, we lawyers have tried and we have lost in, I think, all the writs where we have challenged this mandatory pre-deposit provision. We have mostly lost because such provisions used to be there in VAT also, and under central excise also. When it got introduced, a lot of challenges were made, but courts have frankly refused to accept such challenges. So I completely agree. I think if nothing else, at least for a year, if these can be suspended, because otherwise right of appeal might become infructuous given the cash flow situation for most people.
I agree with Rakesh and Sudipto. Basically, because of the amendment in the legislature, we used to have those system where the taxpayer has to prove to the judicial body that with how it is financially affected, what is the merit of the case. So, because of the amended provision, forget about merit of the case. They would not going to see the financial burden on the financial hardship which going to pay faced by the taxpayer. But unnecessary, this will start with the minimum 20% tax demand basically from the tribunal. So the powers of the tribunal to that extent has been fixed by the legislature. Second important point I just wanted to highlight that Sudipta already said that limitation of time limitation basically is excluded by the Supreme Court, even by the Bombay High Court also. And recently the Mumbai Tribunals has also passed the order. As you're aware that the stay has been granted during this lockdown period, considering that today also, if there is any exigency of matter of any genuine hardship, tribunal is taking the hearing out of turn hearing. So there is no issue. Second important, recently the Bombay Tribunal has passed the order in the case of the basically procedural aspects of as per the income tax tribunal rules. And as per income tax tribunal rules, if the matter has been heard, the tribunal has to decide the order within 90 days from the date of hearing. So, but because of this COVID situation and all the thing, they are not able to pass the order within 90 days. So they have basically excluded the time limitation of 90 days also wherever they are passing the order. I think that is a well thought judgment. Of course, it is relied on the Supreme Court and the High Court judgment on that basis. third important thing I just wanted to, that couple of 2-3 days back, the income tax appellate tribunal has basically, the vice president has facilitated the webinar with the all stakeholders, including chartered accountants, lawyer, tax practitioner, who are appearing before the Mumbai bench of the tribunal, and where the president as well as vice president has invited the basically suggestions from the all stakeholder in order to start the functioning of the court, what they should do. And various ideas, various suggestion has been given, and most likely from 20th of May of this month, the tribunal will start functioning. Of course, initially it will be on the webinar form, but it is the members have clarified, vice president has clarified that there is no compulsion on the appellant to basically taxpayer to attend, go for the webinar type of basically court hearing. If they are not comfortable, they can appear personally whenever the lockdown is free, this thing open. But this is a welcome basically idea and the webinar type of basically suggestion initiated especially by the judiciary body. I think that is going to be a go ahead, this thing time to go basically, because it's lockdown. Because as you are aware that today also we have faceless assessment, we have tried to do this thing appeal procedure. Now it will get extended to the tribunal. I think COVID situation has now created an opportunity for this judicial body also to take the hearing on through webinar.
Okay, so moving forward, in addition to the updates and announcements made by the finance minister and the CBDT, what are the biggest reforms that the industry wants to see in tax laws? Maybe certain sectors would like to get additional reliefs or certain changes in the international trade measures. What exactly is the industry expecting?
Yeah. So basically, as we have seen that in last few days, government has already started announcing a lot of measures to help the people and to give the relief measures to the various sections in the society. Particularly if you talk about tax, actually, I think this is a time, this is an opportunity for everyone and particularly government to structure the entire tax procedure. This is to simplify the tax structure, ease of compliances, and reduce litigation. This is a time where more and more use of the digital means can be taken, and as far as this other measures is like that, this is the unique situation and unique solution is required. Everybody is looking toward the government for a regulatory authority for a different kind of help, actually, whether it is economic help, whether it is procedural help, or whether it is cash flow help, because lakhs of crores of rupees are stuck with the government in the refunds. Everybody is waiting for that money to come and which can be used in the business. I think these are the times where government has to act very fast and help the business as
I think if I may take a minute and if we look at the kind of steps that some of the other countries have done, at least in the indirect tax space, I think that also will give us a lot of good ideas. So we have if you look at Europe, the UK government has announced deferment of VAT payments except for import VAT, which is equivalent to our import IGST, up to 30th June at the option of the taxpayer. So without any interest rate, and he can even extend it to March 2021, and no interest and penalties would be charged. So that's a massive cash flow saving. Australia also, they have a similar deferral system by 6 months. So one can negotiate a deferral plan. One can negotiate an extended deferral plan at a very low interest. So similar deferrals have been announced in Canada, Germany, etc. Procedural relaxations comprehensively. I think that India has also done significantly. A huge amount of procedural relaxations have been announced in various tranches across the laws. On the other end of the spectrum is Saudi Arabia, which has increased the VAT rate from 5% to 15%, which obviously is not something I think we can do in a country like ours. And also on the other end, I don't think widespread rate cuts are also possible given the fiscal situation and given the manner, that the way GST functions. Rate cut may not be an ideal thing, but maybe in some targeted sectors, rate cuts can be thought of for some targeted sectors or some targeted products. Deferment is something I think definitely one can look at because that's ready cash flow impact and which will, I'm sure, be welcomed by industry. Another thing, and this is a very radical suggestion that I read in one of the industry papers, that can we, at least for service sector, go back to cash basis instead of accrual basis, how it used to be in 2011. I think up to 2011 it used to be on cash basis. So can we go back to that? I don't foresee that happening, but in terms of radical ideas, I think that's as radical as it gets. And definitely, if one thinks of it, it will be very, very beneficial from a cash flow perspective. Also, if we look at aviation sector, I think one of the worst hit sectors. There has been a lot of discussion about including ATF in the GST framework, and states have opposed that. But maybe this is the time to include that because, I mean, it's a sort of rock and a hard place kind of a choice. You can choose to give up some of your fiscal federalism, fiscal autonomy, or maybe the airlines will go out of business. Then you have no, geese that lays the golden eggs. So I think that this might be a time using COVID-19 as a pretext to push ATF into the GST framework. And of course, the export benefits. I mean, MEIS, SEIS, while India lost the WTO case last year, the fact that there is a lot of impasse in WTO, I mean, the appellate body is not constituted and India has filed an appeal. So till the time the appeal gets heard, we basically have the leeway. And I think we must use the leeway to continue with MEIS, SEIS schemes so that the exporters are benefited. So I think these are some of the things that one can, really look forward to from the industry side.
So there's one question from one of the participants. Do you expect any deferment of advance tax payment?
I think it's $1 million question actually. If you see that government owned revenue is completely has gone for a toss actually. So April GST collection number has not been announced, and I don't think the government has got any significant contribution, significant collection in the month of April. And the same position is likely to happen in May and June, and we don't know what is going to happen post-June actually, and whether so on one side that entire revenue of the government is completely has gone for the toss, and second on other expenses side there is huge burden of the expenditure on account of the social relief which is to be made. So I think it's a very tough situation I think for the government, and in this situation whether the advance tax deferment will happen or not happen. So like that recently whatever the announcement which has been made, you see that major contributor is the salary plan. There is no relief for the salary. So all this previous 25% reduction is also for the non-salary. And TDS reduction is also temporary because if you don't pay the TDS, the assessee has to pay the tax as a advance tax. It's only a temporary measure for 2-3 months. So I think I don't know. I don't see any relief from government on this that 15 June advance installment get.
I agree with Rakesh related to the advance.
Corporates will earn too much that they have to pay the advance.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll see how the profitability will shape out in this year, and how many corporates will be in the position or in the situation to pay the advance.
So I agree with the Rakesh that the advance tax will be this thing, but definitely under the GST law, Sudipto can also say that they have postponed deferred the this thing tax liability, the payment as well as the compliance part basically. As far as the sector impact is concerned, yes, all sector has a wish list under the COVID situation. So definitely the aviation industry is all facing this issue. Secondly, according to me, the all automobile sector basically, where everybody are looking for the optimization of liquidity. And to buy the motor car or anything nowadays, and not only the going to impact only this current, but going to impact for the next 1 or 2 years, because the purchasing power has to be remain with the customer, and customer, if doesn't have the customer power and looking for the liquidity, he will not want to basically make investment in the car. Similarly, the real estate industry, they are also having a tough time. And if you've seen the last couple of 2-3 years, real estate is basically facing a problem because of the various this thing, because of the RERA, because of the GST situation, because of the sluggish demand, difficult in finding raising the funds for the real estate sector, I think. And in addition to that, now the COVID situation has come up, and which has basically pressure on this thing. Therefore, the consumer purchasing power is going to decide which sector is going to basically run the show post COVID. Second important, from the tax perspective, I find that yes, in the real estate sector, definitely some amendment should be announced by the by CBDT in relation to the stamp duty, section 50C, section 56. Wherever the sale price is basically linked to the stamp duty charges, and the leeway has been given by the budget about the 5 to 10%. I think government should come out and give the more leeway for the difference between the actual set consideration and the stamp duty valuation. That one thing. Related to real estate sector, if the property has not been sold and it is a stock in trade beyond 1 year, the property, the income notional rent will be taxable. And in the COVID situation, I don't find any customer will come for the 1 or 2 years basically for the buying the property. So in that situation, what the real sector, basically the builder and those lobbies should this thing one. Then to 54, if there is a basically restriction on the number of property they can purchase and make investment. So something department, of course, as I mentioned to you, all sectors will have their wish list, but definitely each sector will have the different type of basically problems, and one needs to analyze that which sector is more sensitive currently, and basically government has to take a general consensus considering the liquidity crunch, economy, and also basically second other important is the labor problem, because ultimately large labors are basically are working under this each sector, and government is trying their level best, but yes, these sectors are facing this issue because of the COVID situation.
I think the unfortunate part for India is that our economy was already under stress because of earlier this IL&FS saga and this NBFC issues, and top of this unplanned and unscheduled this COVID situation has come. Okay, so without even COVID also, we know that last year revenue collection was almost 12% lower actually. That was also revised after revision. So there was otherwise also there was a huge problems in some of the sectors, and this is only COVID has only just worsened this situation.
Okay, so we have one more question here from one of the participants. Will Vivad Se Vishwas scheme be further extended? So I think the government has already extended the deadline for settling these tax disputes under this scheme till 31st of December 2020. But I feel the more important question is, considering many of the companies will still be facing liquidity shortage, will companies still opt for this scheme?
I believe yes, company will definitely go for the scheme because of the various things. Of course, this scheme is not as attractive as the service tax and those VAT scheme basically there, because there is no abatement in relation to the principal payment of the tax basically. What the scheme says that if you pay the taxes under the normal provisions of the Act or whatever tax demand, interest and penalty will be waived off. So that is basically basic scheme of the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme. Second important thing, I feel that that considering the liquidity situation, yes, government has been extending the time. Earlier it was 31st March, it extended to 30th June. Now it is 31st December. So definitely the intention of the government to raise the fund by basically find out the resolution for the disputed matters. But second important thing, as Saili has correctly mentioned, that the taxpayers will not have the fund to pay the liability in one shot. And therefore, I would have expected that I would expect from the government that instead of paying in one shot, if they can pay in installment like EMI or something, I think that would make this scheme more attractive.
Yeah, I think on this scheme, as you know that this 31st January, that all litigations up to 31st January was specified as eligible to be settled. Now, when the scheme has been extended to 31st December, and it may be a good opportunity or good case for the government to extend the 31st January date also, maybe to 30th September or maybe to even up to 31st December, and try to garner as much as possible through this scheme. Actually, it will a huge benefit for the business also if that installment is given. At least the entire uncertainty and entire hang up of this liability will go away, and business will be able to concentrate more on the business rather than on this uncertain situation of the tax litigation or other litigation, where that it may turn out to be anytime negative and then cash flow may be completely negative. So it is time for government to make this scheme more attractive. The 31st January time limit can be extended. There may be some kind of relief from account of principal also, installment payment also. I think it's that 4-5 lakh crore rupees of the amount which is stuck in the litigation. It may be win-win situation both for the government as well as business. So government get their collection and business get not have to think about this litigation anymore actually, and can be concentrate more towards the future rather than past litigation.
Okay. There's one more question from the participants. Will shortfall in payment of TDS be counted as defaulter?
So I think as per the current regulation, it has means like shortfall of TDS will have the interest in the section 201 and then penalty in the section 271 capital C and all these implication. Till the government there is some announcement or there is some relief from the regulatory. I think this is a big issue. So we may always go and argue before the authorities that not for the interest, at least for penalty, there was a reasonable or there is a bona fide reasons for not paying the taxes.
Okay. So as we were discussing that there will be a need for collection of revenue for the government by way of taxes. So do you think there will be any additional tax burden on certain sectors, or will there be any additional taxes which could get introduced, for example, COVID relief cess or super rich tax or something similar, or maybe additional tax on luxury goods?
Rajesh, you want to take first?
See, recently there is one unofficial report has been issued by the department staff basically. And as per that report, it is called a FORCE report, Fiscal Option and Response to the COVID-19 epidemic. That is called the topic of that report basically. And that certain department staff has basically recommended to the government that what actions has to be taken, proactive action has to be taken by the, of course, CBDT is not subscribing, Ministry of Finance is not subscribing the views of that report, but definitely that report will have some credibility in terms of the suggestion. I would say that for last so many 5 to 6 years, this has been going on in the minds of the government, that whether we should add the wealth tax, whether we should add the inheritance tax or estate duty. So from that perspective, of course, you need to see the intention of the law. Wealth tax was there under the income tax, under this direct tax regime. Inheritance estate duty was also prevalent till 1983. But both basically act has been basically levy has been abolished, saying that it is not a productive in nature. The revenue we generated from this levy are not in productive in this thing. And therefore, they have basically abolished the two levies. But if you see, the intention behind bringing this net, because they want to basically remove the disparity between the richer and poor. And that's why they want to bring inheritance tax and the wealth tax act. And I'm not surprised if they bring a wealth tax, because under the Income Tax Act, when you filing the income tax return, all the assessors are required to report their financial assets, their immovable property, all types of assets in the return of income. And as you are aware that wealth tax, we used to pay the tax on the unproductive assets. So if they bring back wealth tax in the place, government is already having all information about the assets, holding of assets by the SSE. So definitely, but considering the past scenarios where those acts has been abolished because of the unproductiveness of the revenue. So we need to see whether government wants to bring those additional levies under the income, this thing under the direct tax. Second important thing in relation to the super rich tax, you must have seen that last 1 year, the surcharge has been increased in relation to the individual and HUF. And the maximum tax rate is going up to 42.74%. So from that perspective, the surcharge has already been increased as far as the individual and the HUF is concerned. So from that perspective, if you want to increase basic tax from 30% to 40% in relation to the super rich, I think it won't be basically feasible. Current the scenario is there. Because what is happening is that main tax basically we are getting only major from the corporate sector. Individual salary sectors are there, and most of the highest super rich tax people are very few in the country. So how much they are going to, how much revenue are going to generate from that? Second important aspect related to the imposing a cess, COVID cess, or of course state government has tried to introduce the liquor says, petroleum, diesel says in each state. I don't know about the central says how much this thing. Fourth important thing is that government is trying to tweaking the rate in the surcharge. We must have seen there is the change in the surcharge, and education says also been increased over a period of from 1% to now it is 4%. And we need to understand what is the difference between all type of says. Basic tax, as you are aware, that it is distributed between the state and the central government. As far as education is concerned, whatever the cess you collected in the form of education has to be spent for the education and the higher education purposes. As far as surcharge is there, where government always tried to pick, because all surcharge collection are getting in the kit of the central government. So we need to understand the basic ethos of these, whether increasing tax rate would basically support the government. So from that perspective, the government has to consider what are the advantage, disadvantage by putting this levy. The other important point, of course, Sudipta will also throw some light about the, globally the oil prices has come down, crude prices has come down. Whether that benefit get passed on to the customer, I think that is the real, basically we need to understand from the government perspective, whether they are ready to pass on that benefit to ultimate customer.
I think it's quite the other way that the state governments have gone, and even the central government. I think we are using this as a lucky break, that the crude prices are low. So as long, and the common man was used to paying 72, 73, that kind of a per liter price. So let's keep that price fixed and keep increasing the taxes. So I think both the center and state, as you rightly said, I think every state has imposed, either hiked the VAT rate or levied some sort of a cess. Center has also done that. So I don't see the benefit being passed on. And I don't think at this point people are very worried about inflation. Because overall, in a recession scenario, you don't worry too much about inflation. So I don't think there will be an intent to pass on the benefit of fuel or the fact that we have upside on fuel. On the other point, I sort of echo your sentiments. We need to be while it will be a very popular thing to say that let's hike taxes on luxuries. But what is luxury? Is air conditioner a luxury? Every sort of air conditioner a luxury in the month of June? I mean, in today's world, in every city of India, maybe the highest end air conditioner is, but something in that 15-20,000 range may not necessarily be luxury. So the precision for that has to be scalpel-like. There is also talk about trade measures, because our PM mentioned, be vocal about local. So different people are interpreting it differently. So by being vocal about local, it does not mean that we will shun foreign investment or we will undo everything that has been achieved under WTO. So we need to have that balanced approach, because whatever we produce, we will also need to export. So if we start creating trade barriers, I mean, okay, you create a trade barrier against one country, maybe you do that against China. But if you say I will be an isolationist, I think then we are creating trouble for ourselves, because we also have to export our goods. I mean, once all the manufacturing hub starts functioning, then where will we sell our goods? We all need international trade to function. So I think all of those aspects need to be very, very precisely thought out before we take any such action, whether increasing taxes or taking trade measures. I think on a temporary basis, like, some products, I don't know, like steel or something, one can think of non-tariff barriers. Like you can have, if not anti-dumping duty or safeguard duty, but you can have a minimum import price for some certain kind of products where that the domestic industry has taken a lot of hit. Also, we need to keep in mind that China and Southeast Asia has recovered and started before we have. They are already functional, their factories are already running. Whereas our factories, I think many of them will start only in June in a full-fledged flow. So there will be a glut of products that come in from under the ASEAN FTA and from China. So I think for a temporary period, we need to be cognizant. But as I said, one has to be very, very measured in these things and not just be populist.
Yeah, it means like increasing tax is not a solution, because that as far as company corporate taxes are concerned, we have recently announced that 25% rate actually, and now again increasing that that entire certainty, entire investor confidence get lost. So it will have huge impact on the FDI and global investors' mind. As far as personal taxation are concerned, we are already one of the highest tax paying jurisdiction. So our rates go all the way from up to 42%. So surcharge is already 37%, 25%. So taxes are already on the higher side. I think instead of increasing the tax, I think government should think of reducing the taxes and increasing the tax base actually. And as we all experience that whenever the rates are low, your compliance level is much high actually, and collections are ultimately better. We have seen in the past in the various sectors when the prices are reduced. We have experienced in telecom. When the prices reduce, that consumption has increased to a large extent. So by reducing the tax, the compliance level will increase, and India has a huge potential to increase in the tax base. So as on date, also only 5% of the population files their tax returns, and hardly 3% pays the tax. So there is a large chunk of people who are still out of the tax base, and by reducing the tax rate and easing the compliance, I think it is in fact tax revenue can be increased rather than increasing the taxes. So once increasing the tax, black marketing will be people will start thinking about more ways and means to evade the taxes. It is not going to solve the problem. It is going to only aggravate this issue.
And on the point of higher taxes on alcohol, I think I am personally conflicted, having today only challenged the rate hike in the Delhi High Court. But I think that's the logic that we said, I think applies for that as well. That okay, some bit of rate hike is fine. I think on something like alcohol or tobacco, you can have probably a 10-20% hike. But if you go the way the Delhi government has gone, you put a 70% on MRP. Firstly, whether you can put a tax on MRP itself, it's a circular logic. And secondly, 70% is such a high amount, you basically drive things underground. If you put a tax as high as 70%, then you are encouraging spurious alcohol consumption, you are encouraging smuggling, you are encouraging underground trade. So I think all of those things need to be completely kept in mind when we sort of talk about increase in taxes. I think someone has raised a query that is there any scope of increase in GST compensation cess. I think all the discussion that we have had probably answers your question. scope, definitely there is scope, but should that happen? Will that happen? I would be surprised, frankly, if it happens.
I don't know, means like as Maruti has announced, in April month, not a single car has been sold in entire India. Not a single car within the population of 132 lakhs.
Correct.
And in this kind of scenario, the taxes are increased. I don't know whether whether it will help or it will only have a very negative impact on the industry.
Correct.
Somebody has raised the issue about extension of exemption, which is provided under Section 80 for various sectors, whether they will get extended or not. I think we need to wait and watch whether definitely in the earlier scenario also, wherever the deadline for claiming any exemption, deduction like Section 54 or payment of the taxes, payment of the provident fund, payment of LIC, provident fund, the PPF, ATC, all deduction, basically the government has already clarified that they has been extended till 30th June. So even the deposit of the tax which you could not have, deposit of the payment eligible ATC deduction or Section 54 investment, which you could not have this thing deposited before 31st of March because of the COVID situation, it got extended till the 30th June.
Okay, so before we move forward, a request to all the participants. So there's a polling tab on your screen that is visible to you. So if you click on that, the tab which has 3 bars on it, if you click on that, you'll get a poll in which you can give your views on and you can predict what the revenues tax collection would be based on the questions that we have posted. So I would request everybody to take that poll. So okay, so moving forward, what impact do you see on taxation of foreign companies?
Of course, as far as the foreign of taxation concerned, basically we have the tax rate of 40% in relation to the foreign corporate tax. At this moment, all the foreign companies who was having an income from India, they required to file their income tax return compulsory and also basically comply with the domestic tax law of India. Other important point, we need to understand what is the difference between the Indian corporates and the foreign company, and how much basically ultimate profit received by the shareholders. What are the taxes they suffered? So at the corporate level, they suffer the taxes, but at when the profit distributed to the shareholders, what is the tax implication? So if you see the domestic tax law, we used to have the dividend distribution tax. So corporate used to pay 30% tax. Now it will get reduced to 22 or 25% depending upon the industry, depending upon this thing. An important thing is that we used to have dividend distribution tax. Now dividend distribution tax has been abolished. Now dividend get taxed in the hands of the shareholder. So if you see, compare between the corporate taxation of the Indian company and the foreign company, one needs to decide that ultimately what tax impact ultimately are hit because of the ultimate the profit gets taxable in the hands of the shareholders. So one needs to see. Second important, of course, digitize the equalization levy. That is an important source of income from the the foreign companies who's having a basically e-commerce transaction. So definitely the foreign company are basically, and in India, as compared to the other economy, other distinct countries, India is having the high rate of the foreign taxation. Foreign rate of taxation is concerned. Apart from that, now this is equalization levy we have introduced in the law. So from that perspective, I don't find, of course, this forced task report also talk about the increase in the foreign rate of taxation. But seeing the India is trying to basically showcase to the world that we are having a low cost economy. There's an ease of doing business. India has a past history of making retrospective amendments. So by increasing the tax rate, what message you are going to give it to the foreign basically investor? So from that perspective, we need to be very circumspect about that, whether are you going to achieve anything by increasing the tax rate in the hands of the foreign company, because tax rate in the hands of foreign company already on the higher side.
I think the same point is because again the certainty actually. So just keep on increasing the tax. Actually, it will give more. The foreign investor will be more scared about investing in India because India is already known for its retrospective amendment and means like making the ruling of the courts ineffective by amending the law and changing the tax rate, tax procedure, tax rules and regulation in between actually. So I think this is not only going this is not going to help increasing the yes, tax on the foreign.
Okay, and what about the global initiatives like BEPS MLI? Will they be put on the back burner considering we have more burning issues to take care of?
So Saili, I think you raised the important issue because as you are aware that as per the BEPS action plan, MLI has come into force. India has entered into 29 out of 95. MLI has effective from 1st April in relation to 29 countries. And from that perspective, of course, because of the COVID situation, these issues may not be that frontier in relation to the other aspect, but definitely going ahead, the MLI issue is going to be a very important issue as far as the foreign taxation is concerned. Other important, I just wanted to highlight that you referred to the earlier that residencies circular. In relation to that, you know, the government has come out with the relaxation for the excluding of the number of days because of the forced presence of that person in India. Similarly, under the Income Tax Act, they have come out with the clarification for the relation to the lower withholding tax is concerned. If a foreign company has already applied for the lower withholding tax in the last year, or in this year they made application, but the order has not been passed. So government has come out with the relaxation in relation to the lower withholding tax certificate. So I'm just basically awaiting that if the CBDT will come out with a similar clarification as far as the section 195 is concerned. As you're aware today, that payer as well as payer has an option. Either he can go to the tax department or he can go to the chartered accountant for certifying whether the tax is properly determined on the overseas remittances. And in order to claim the treaty benefit, and the non-resident has an option to be either governed by the provisions of the Income Tax Act or the treaty, whichever is beneficial to that assessee. So in order to give the treaty benefit, the law says that in order to give the treaty benefit, the non-resident has to produce the tax residency certificate. Now, what is happening that because of the lockdown situation, all countries are not functioning, including their income tax department. And therefore, they are not able to produce the tax residency certificate to the Indian payer. And that's why I would request the CBDT that they should come out with the clarification or relaxation as far as the production of the TRC for the chartered accountant, because chartered accountant has to verify whether the tax residence certificate has been produced or not, you know, before he gives the treaty benefit on that remittance. So after 1st April, CBDT should come out that whether they can relax the condition of the production of the tax, the residency certificate as far as the 195 remittance is concerned. I think this is a very important clarification we are waiting from the CBDT on this point.
I think I have one micro point, which is on the transfer pricing side. Whether because of COVID-19, a lot of critical assumptions have changed or will change. So does that get us or allow us to walk away from APAs? I mean, especially multinational companies, can APAs be changed? Can they be walked out from? And connected, of course, will be, is there a impact from a customs valuation side or a GST valuation side when it comes to, you know, transactions between a resident company and its group company outside? So I think these transfer pricing under all the laws, customs, GST, and income tax, that the impact of that will need to be examined very, very carefully by all assessees.
I think Sudipto have raised a valid point in relation to APA, because the APA basically agreement between the taxpayer and the government. And from that perspective, we need to see what are the circumstances, what are the functions, what are the risks, what are the asset assumed before determining the transfer price. And if the circumstance, there is change in the circumstances, those APA may not applicable. So from that perspective, we need to come back whether we can renegotiate the APA which already agreed with the government because of the change in the scenario.
Agree.
So while we look forward to more such measures in coming days, this was a very, very good discussion to have. We got a good perspective of what the industry expects and what areas of tax needs more clarification and etc. So thank you so much, Mr. Athawale, Mr. Gupta and Mr. Bhattacharjee for sharing your views and investing time with us this Friday evening. I also thank all the participants who joined us today for this wonderful session. Please stay safe and healthy. But before we conclude this session, I would request Harshad Nathu, who is our success manager, customer success manager, to take you through a brief demo of the Riverus Telescope offering. Harshad, over to you.
Thank you, Saili. So I'll quickly share my screen. Yeah. So basically, I'll just take you to the home page of our product. So basically, Riverus is a legal tech company, and we have a tool for income tax research, wherein you get information on 250 plus issues in income tax, which have been humanly curated. So I'll just start a walkthrough. So it is an AI-driven product where you can just search for the issues. So this is our library where you can see all the issues are listed one by one. So there are various filters given on left-hand side. So if you want to filter these issues, you can use this. Otherwise, there is a search button given here to search amongst the issues. So let us say you are searching for some issues on 14A. You can just add some keywords over here. So like we have 5 issues related to 14A. Likewise, if you want to see any of these issues, you can simply click on the issue. The issue gets open. The brief description of the issue is available here. Related subject tags are also available. Then the next tab on the left hand side you can see is the legislation. So whatever sections which are applicable to this issue, notifications or any circulars which are there, all that legislative information you will find it here. The next tab over here is about the top cases, where you get access to the important cases which are related to this issue. So case name, the forum which decided it, the key points of this case, outcome, everything has been summarized here. So you can just go through all the relevant cases one by one. The next tab over here is the tracker. So tracker is for checking the recent developments on that issue. So if you are following an issue, you can see what are the developments which are happening there. Also, there is a button given to follow a issue. So once you start following a issue, we will send you the notifications related to this issue. So if, let us say, if you are following this and new case is coming up, let us say 2 months down the line, we will send you a notification in this notification tab, and you can just update your knowledge with respect to that particular decision. I'll again go back to the library. Apart from issues, we also have the industry-wise tracking. So like many of the professionals are catering to very specific industry, and they are interested in knowing the litigation happening with particular industry. So you can always start following the industry as well. And whatever cases have been decided in the past 1 year, you will get it here. Similarly, you can also track parties. So currently we have few of the companies on which we have collected the information. So the follow option is available. And lastly, there is an option to request a party. Similar option is there for industries as well. So you can just request for an industry or a party which you want to track. Similarly, if you don't find any issue of your interest in readily available, you can always ask for it. So you can use this ask a service. You can just tell us your brief issue, and we'll make sure that it is added in our issue bank in the next 2 to 3 working days. So we have a team of chartered accountants who is working on this. So once we receive a query, we work upon it and we provide you with the relevant information. And one more interesting part about this product is that this is mobile friendly. So you can see a lot of space is kept empty. So this gives you a better experience on your mobile device as well. So this product comes along with a repository of over 4 lakh reported and unreported cases in income tax. So that is called as research map over here. So if you just click on this, you will be redirected to the research map product, where you can search for the cases with the keyword sections, etc. The unique feature of this product is the judge analytics. So I'll quickly walk you through the one of the famous judge at ITIT Mumbai, Mr. Mahavir Singh. So once I search for it, I can just have a look at his profile. So around 6,800 odd cases he have decided. Cases decided in last year, that is calendar year 2019. The outcome of those cases is available here. The lawyers who appeared before him, subjects what he dealt, everything is available over here. Then this is the interesting feature, that is the most referred cases by a judge. So what we have done, we have analyzed all those 6,000 odd cases of Mr. Mahavir Singh, and we found out that these are the cases which he relies upon quite frequently. So this Godrej and Boyce Manufacturing Company Limited, this case he had used as a precedent in another 229 cases. So likewise, you can just have a sense of what are the precedents used by him. If you want to search for the precedents used by a judge, you can always go for the judge precedent search, where you can just add a keyword and you can get the results with respect to the precedents used by a judge on particular subject matter. So if I just put penalty over here, so he'll show me the results on which he relied upon for deciding the penalty related matters. So there are around 577 cases. So of course it's a huge number. So you can add one more keyword over here. It is a prosecution. So there are around 29 cases on which Mr. Mahavir Singh relies upon while deciding the cases related to penalty and prosecution. So this will help you to decide your litigation strategy. I will again go back. Then below that are the total number of cases decided by him, like 7,000 cases are there. There are various filters available on the left hand side, forum wise, year of decision wise, based on the outcome, based on section. So you can simply add any of these filters. So if you want to see the cases decided by him on section 147, you can simply add that filter. And out of the total results, there are around 1172 cases which were on section number 147. Similarly, if you want to see along with the penalties, you can add another section filter, that is 271. So once you add this, it will give you the results with respect to penalty and income escaping assessment. So I think it is taking a little longer time to load the results. Then one important feature over here is the popularity sort. So if you want to see what are the popular cases of him on any particular subject, you can simply sort these results by popularity. So popularity is to say that number of times the particular case has been used as a precedent. So the results are getting loaded. Yes, so first case, Southern Petrochemicals Industry. This was used as a precedent in 68 other cases. So if you just want to have a look at this, I'll just open one of the case. So on the left hand side, you will get all the judicial information, who are the judges involved, lawyers involved in this case name, then the citations which are available publicly, those case for that particular case. The key points of the case, black letter law is also available. Then there are three colors on the screen, blue, orange and pink. So what we have done, we have highlighted the issues and grounds of appeal in blue color, arguments in orange color, holding an outcome in pink color. So even if you just go through the highlighted text, you can understand the gist. Then on the right hand side, you can see what are the sections discussed in this case, then what are the other precedents used while deciding this particular case. So this case refers to are the backward citations, and these are the forward citation. That is, these are the 68 other cases in which this particular case was used as a precedent. So the case name, forum which used it, bench which used it, outcome, decision year and assessment year. I'll again go back to the home page over here. Similar to judge profiles, we also have the lawyer profiles. So I'll quickly show you one of the famous lawyer, Mr. S.N. Suparkar. So yes, this is the complete profile of Mr. Suparkar. Number of cases decided by him, years active, then the recent years practice, and cases decided in the recent year. All that data you will get it here. And similar filters are also available here, like forum, decision year, outcome, etc. So this is one part of it. This comes along with one more interesting feature, that is the legislation information. So I'll go to laws tab over here. So once you click on the laws, if you want to search for any specific section or any specific keyword, you can use this search. Otherwise, all sections have been listed here chapter wise. So like I'll just show you one of the sections, that is 10A. All the related sections to this are available here. Direct link is provided. Below that are the rules which are relevant to this particular section, and related notifications, circulars, whatever information is there, everything is available. On the right hand side, you can see the amendment history over here. So if you want to see the act which was applicable for any specific year, you can simply click on this blue color ball and you can directly jump to the particular year. Otherwise, the scroll button is also available here. So if you want to go back, you can use the scroll button. And the next important feature over here is the legislative intent for particular section. So if I just click on the legislative intent, so sometimes what happens, the judges also use the intent of the legislation while deciding a particular case. So if you want to see how the intent has been used while deciding a case, we are able to extract that as well, and that you will find it here, which we have highlighted in the purple color. So this is the intent, how they have used it while deciding particular case. So this is second part of it. The third part is for the case search, which what we call it as a super search. So basically super search is the most forward search, where you can pre-select the parameters on which you want to see the cases. So you can add specific courts, judges, lawyers, assessment years, date of decision, etc. For searching with using the keywords, you can precisely search for using keywords in 6 things, either in the full judgment, issue statements, key points, holdings, arguments, or even the black letter law. You just have to put your keywords here. Then the OR functionality is given here. So if you want to search for the key phrases either of, you can use the OR functionality. If any one of the key phrases is mandatory, you can use the AND filter. And similarly, you can precisely search in these 6 things. Also, if you want to exclude any specific thing, you can use the exclude filter. Also, similar logic is there for sections. Like if you want to put section filters like cases related to section 68 and 132, you can use the AND filter, or 60, or if you want to see the interplay between 2 sections, you can use OR filter of your choice. Similarly, exclude filter is also given over here. Along with this, there is one important feature which is there, which you find on the homepage itself, that is the latest cases. So if you want to see the recent trends, you can just go to the latest cases, like which is readily available on the homepage. So currently we have the case which was decided on 13th of May and we are on 15th. So that is how quickly we update our database. Apart from this, we have a facility to save your research work. So like if you want to save any case for your future referencing, you can simply create a tag for it. So I'll just show it how you can add the tags. So I'll just open one of the tagged cases which I have. So this is a button given to tag a case. So this case I had tagged for 113 ZB. So you can similarly create more tags. Like I'll just create one of the tags, ABC Limited. So once you add a tag to a case, it will be saved for your future referencing. Also, one part I didn't cover before, that is the download a PDF here. So if you want to see the true copy of the judgment which has been uploaded on the court's website, you can just download that true copy of the judgment over here. And if you want to submit it, you can simply attach it with your submission. So this is about it. And all of you are invited to take a free trial of it during this lockdown is there. So if you are interested, then please contact us. You can write to me on harshad@riverus.in. or hello@riverus.in. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Saili, over to you.
Thank you, Harshad. I once again thank all the participants and the panelists for joining today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.